Imagine for a moment that all the chaos of life, every joy, every sorrow, every twist of fate, is not as random as it appears. Beneath the noise, beneath the seeming disorder of the world, lies something ancient and unchanging. A silent rhythm, a structure so subtle and yet so vast that it holds the very fabric of reality together. This is the hidden world of numbers. Not the numbers we use to count coins or mark the hours of our day, but living principles, the original forces that shape everything we see and feel. Long ago, mystics, sages, and philosophers turned their gaze beyond the stars and into the soul of existence itself, seeking to understand the secret language that holds the universe together. And among these seekers was a man named Westcott, who speaks of the monad, the number one, as the starting point of all creation. Westcott writes that one, the monad, is more than just a beginning. It is the source, the silent, formless origin from which all things emerge. Before there was light or shadow, sound or silence, there was one, a point without dimension, a center without circumference, as the ancients said. Consider that for a moment. Before anything takes shape, before there is division into many, there must be unity. And this unity is not emptiness, but pure being, containing within itself the potential of everything that could ever exist. In Westcott's view, one is the symbol of the divine, the eternal source. Call it God, call it the infinite, call it what you will. It is that which is whole, needing nothing outside itself to exist. And from this one, all other numbers, and thus all of creation, flow. To truly grasp what this means is to realize that everything you see around you, every tree, every stone, every thought in your mind, is in some way a reflection of the monad. All multiplicity, all the many that fill our world, are manifestations of the one. Westcott reminds us that when we think of numbers, we often think of separation, of many units stacked together. But before there can be two, before any division or difference, there is one. And in that one, everything is already contained in seed form, much like the entire tree is already contained in a tiny seed, invisible to the eye. In a world so often filled with fragmentation, divisions between people, between nations, between ourselves and others, to reflect on the monad is to remember that at the deepest level all is one. You and I, though we may seem different, share in the same primal unity. Westcott points out that the monad is indivisible. You cannot break one into pieces without destroying its very nature. It reminds us of something unbreakable within us, that essence of life and consciousness that nothing in the world can truly divide or diminish. He also reflects on how the monad symbolizes the beginning of all motion. Before one, there is no movement, because there is nothing to move. But once one exists, it holds within itself the potential for all action and creation. It is like the spark that lights the flame, the moment of first breath. And so, when you feel lost or broken, when the world seems scattered in pieces around you, think of the monad, that still point of unity and potential within you, waiting to begin again. Westcott draws from the wisdom of the Pythagoreans, those ancient seekers of numbers, mysteries, who believed that one was the essence of spirit, the soul of the cosmos. They taught that numbers were not human inventions, but the laws by which the universe lives and moves. And if one is the first and highest law, then everything in existence is an echo of that first unity. Think of how everything in nature returns to one, the river flowing into the sea, the seasons circling back to spring, the breath that comes and goes, returning us to ourselves. The monad teaches that life is a circle, not a line. We may think of ourselves as isolated, as individuals moving forward in time, but in truth, we are always returning to that center, to that unity that binds us to everything else. Westcott also reminds us that one is the parent of all other numbers. Without one, two cannot exist, nor can three or four or any number. This is a profound thought, because it means that no matter how complex life becomes, no matter how many parts and pieces there are, everything originates from a single, simple source. Perhaps when life feels overwhelming, when you feel like there are too many problems to face, too many pieces to pick up, it is worth remembering the lesson of the monad, that everything has one root, and that sometimes, by returning to that root, we can find peace. Westcott writes that because the monad is whole and sufficient, it symbolizes strength and independence. It does not require anything else to exist, and perhaps within each of us there is a spark of this same strength, a quiet chord that remains untouched by the storms of life. When we reflect on the monad, we are invited to return to this inner place, to remember that beneath all our fears and doubts, we are whole. Westcott even points out that ancient philosophers considered one to be both male and female, not as genders, but as the source of all duality. From one, both the active and passive, the light and the dark, the giving and receiving forces of the world are born. Thus, one contains all opposites reconciled, and this, perhaps, is a lesson for us in our divided world, that beyond the differences that divide us, there is a deeper unity where all opposites meet. So what does this mean for you, here, now? Perhaps it means this: you are not separate from the universe. The same one that gave birth to stars and galaxies also lives in you. You are not alone, though you may sometimes feel so. You are part of the great unity, and every breath you take is an echo of that first breath when one became many. And so, when you are troubled, when you feel lost in the confusion of life's many numbers, debts to pay, tasks to do, days to count, remember the monad. Remember that beneath all complexity lies a simple truth. You are whole. You are part of the one, and nothing can take that away. As Westcott reminds us, numbers shape reality, but before all others stands one, and in that one, there is peace. But there is also something quietly mysterious about the number 2. It is a number we take for granted, and yet it holds within it the secret of how the world moves, how life begins, how thought itself takes shape. In the beginning there was only one. The ancients called this the monad, a symbol of unity, of completeness, of the whole, that needs nothing outside itself. But even within that unity, there stood a hidden desire to know itself, to reflect upon itself, and so from the one, there arose the two. Westcott speaks of the dyad as the first breaking of unity, but not a breaking in the way we might imagine. Rather, the dyad is the first breath of life, the first division that makes relationship possible. Without two, there can be no reflection, no conversation, no meeting of minds or hearts. It is through the dyad that the world steps out of formlessness and into motion. Where there was stillness, now there is movement. Where there was silence, now there is a possibility of sound. It is the number that makes opposites real. From light comes shadow, from sky comes earth, from knowing comes not knowing. The dyad holds them all. 2 is often spoken of as the number of division, but Westcott invites us to see deeper than that simple meaning. Because what is division if not the beginning of a relationship? When something divides, it creates the space between, and in that space, connection begins. 2 things may be separate, but they are forever bound in relation to each other. Consider the day and the night. They appear as opposites, and yet they endlessly give way to one another, painting the rhythm of time. One does not exist without the other. The dyad lives in this eternal exchange, this gentle turning of one into the other. In human life, 2 becomes the foundation of every encounter. It is the look shared between 2 people, the understanding that arises in conversation, the longing for connection. Without 2, we would live in a world without mirrors, never able to see ourselves through the eyes of another. Westcott reflects on how 2 gives rise to knowledge itself. For how can anything be known unless it is seen in contrast? Light is known only because we have known darkness. Joy is felt deeply because we have tasted sorrow. The dyad makes knowledge possible by giving us a world of difference, a world where we can see what something is because we can see what it is not. Yet, in giving us knowledge, the dyad also gives us uncertainty, for when there is only one, there is no choice to be made. But when there are two, we stand between paths. And in that standing, in that space of hesitation, is born the question that every soul must face. Which way will I go? This is the quiet challenge of the dyad. It is the number of decision, of standing at the threshold between one thing and another, between moving forward and turning back, between holding on and letting go. It marks the first step into the unknown. And so, it is not surprising that Westcott calls 2 the number of polarity, of tension. For between two, there is always a pull, a gravity that draws them together, even as they seem to stand apart. It is this pull that gives birth to creation itself. The tension between opposites is what makes the world alive. Look at the ocean and the shore. One rushes forward, the other stands firm. Yet, together they shape the coastline, endlessly giving and receiving. Look at the sky and the earth. They never meet, and yet they define the space where all life happens. This is the dance of the dyad, the quiet rhythm that beats at the heart of existence. But there is a deeper lesson here that Westcott hints at, a truth that often goes unnoticed. For though 2 may appear as division, as separation, in reality, it is also the first step back toward unity. When 1 becomes 2, it does not lose itself, but begins to understand itself more fully. The dyad is a mirror. In the presence of the other, we come to know ourselves. It is in friendship, in love, in challenge, and even in opposition that we see who we are. Without another to reflect us back to ourselves, we would drift in the solitude of the monad, never fully awakened. 2 teaches us that we are not meant to walk alone, that every journey, every discovery, every creation arises in relationship with another person, with nature, with the world itself. The dyad whispers to us that even in the moments when we feel most divided, we are part of something greater. Westcott also reminds us that 2 has long been associated with mystery, because when faced with duality, with opposites, we often struggle to understand how they belong together. How can light and darkness, joy and sorrow, hope and fear all be part of one life? But perhaps the dyad is not meant to resolve this mystery. Perhaps it is meant to teach us to live within it, to accept that life is not made of simple answers, but of the meeting and parting of opposites. And in that space, we grow. The ancients saw 2 as the symbol of womanhood, of the feminine principle, for it is the number of birth, of bringing forth life from within. Just as the mother holds within her the mystery of new life, so does the dyad hold within it the power of creation. It is the beginning of all becoming. Yet the dyad also contains the seeds of illusion, for when we only see 2, we may forget the one from which they came. We may believe that we are truly separate, that there is no deeper connection, no unity beneath the surface, but Westcott urges us to look beyond that illusion. When we stand between 2 things, torn between them, we are invited to remember that they are not truly apart. They are different faces of the same truth, 2 sides of the same coin. And if we can hold both in our awareness, we begin to glimpse the unity behind the seeming division. In this way, the dyad calls us to wisdom, not the wisdom that comes from choosing sides, but the deeper wisdom that sees the whole, that understands that life is a conversation between opposites and that we are meant to listen to both sides. The dyad shows us that life is always in motion, that nothing stays fixed. The night gives way to day, and day to night. Joy gives way to sorrow, and sorrow to joy. All things move in their time, and in that moment, we find meaning. So when you feel caught between choices, when life feels like a tension that will not resolve, remember the dyad. Remember that you are standing in the very space where life begins to unfold, that you are part of a greater dance, a movement older than time. Westcott's reflection on 2 is a quiet reminder that division is not the end. It is the beginning of a journey back to unity, back to understanding, back to connection. And so, as you move through your life, As you encounter opposites within yourself and in the world, carry with you the wisdom of the dyad. Let it remind you that though you may walk between two, you are never alone. You are part of a deeper wholeness that holds all things together. In two, you will find both the question and the answer, the longing and its fulfillment, the division and its healing. And perhaps as you walk this path, you will begin to see what Westcott saw, that beyond every division, beyond every pair of opposites, there is something waiting to be known. Something that has been there all along, something that will carry you forward, even when the way is unclear. Yet there is a quiet order running beneath the surface of things, an ancient pattern that threads itself through nature, through time, and through human life. The Pythagoreans believed that numbers hold the key to unlocking this deeper reality. Among these numbers, the triad, the number 3, holds a special place, a symbol of completion, of understanding, and of the mysteries that govern our world. When Westcott writes of the triad, he does not speak of it as merely a figure that follows 1 and 2, he treats it as something far more profound, a living symbol, an ancient force that touches everything we do and are. 3 is the number of harmony, of the resolution that comes after division. Where the monad stands alone and the dyad divides, the triad reconciles. It draws the opposites together and makes something new from their tension. Think of how nature itself is shaped by 3, the dawn, the day, and the night, a cycle that governs the earth's breathing, the past, the present, and the future, the way time unfolds, carrying us forward in its unseen current. Even the human soul, as many philosophers have seen it, is made of 3 parts: the mind that thinks, the heart that feels, and the will that acts. Westcott reflects on how the triad brings balance to what was divided. Where there are 2 forces pulling in different directions, the triad steps in, not to take sides, but to form a bridge. It is the mediator, the one who listens to both and finds a way forward. In every conflict, there is always the possibility of a third way, though often we do not see it until we quiet ourselves enough to listen. Consider how the number 3 shapes the way we tell stories. Every tale has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Without these 3 parts, the story feels unfinished, lacking meaning. In the same way, our own lives are stories still being told. There are moments when we find ourselves caught between the past we cannot change and a future we cannot see. And yet, it is in the present, the third moment, where we live, where choices are made, and where healing can begin. Westcott points to the triad as the number of wisdom. Not the kind of wisdom that comes from simple knowledge, but the deeper wisdom that understands how things fit together. Because 3 sees both sides and then steps beyond them. It is the point where understanding dawns, like the morning sun rising to break the tension between night and day. There is something deeply comforting in knowing that life itself seems to follow this pattern, that for every tension there is a way through, for every question an answer waiting in time. We live much of our lives in the space of the 2, caught between what we want and what we fear, between what was and what might be. But Westcott reminds us that there is always a third, a way that brings these into harmony. Think of a chord of music, how it takes 3 notes to create harmony, to give depth and beauty to sound. A single note may be pure, but it is only in relation to others that it finds meaning. And when 2 notes clash, it is the third that can resolve them, soften their edges, and bring them together. Our relationships too are shaped by 3. 2 people may love, may struggle, may grow, but it is often a third element, whether a shared dream, a challenge faced together, or simply time, that strengthens the bond and turns mere connection into something lasting. Westcott also reminds us that the triad holds a spiritual mystery. Across cultures and beliefs, the number 3 recurs as a symbol of the divine, the Christian Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, the Hindu Trimurti, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. Even in ancient Egyptian thought, there is Isis, Osiris, and Horus. These are not mere repetitions of myth, but reflections of a truth that runs deep in the human heart. that life is never just one thing, never only divided into two, but is a dance of three forces creating the world anew. When we think of ourselves, we often struggle between what we feel and what we think. But there is a third voice within us, a quieter, wiser voice that knows when to act and when to wait. Westcott would have us recognize this third part, this center of balance within as the place where clarity lives. In his reflections, the triad is also the number of growth. Nothing comes fully formed from nothing. First there is a seed, the one. Then there is division, the tension of two. But growth happens in the third, when these forces meet and create something more. A child is born from two parents, but the child is a third, a new life, a new story. Ideas are born the same way. A thought meets a challenge, and in their meeting, a new understanding arises. This is how numbers shape reality. Not as cold, abstract symbols, but as living principles that move through everything we see and experience. The triad reminds us that life is always moving toward wholeness, even when we cannot yet see the way. Westcott saw the triad as a sign of stability. 3 points form a triangle, the most stable of shapes. From ancient times, builders have used the triangle because it holds its form, resists collapse. In the same way, when we find the three parts of ourselves, our mind, our heart, and our will, and bring them into balance, we stand firm against life's storms. But the triad is not just about stillness, it is also about movement, the turning of cycles, the rhythm of life, birth, life, death, planting, growing, harvesting, beginnings, middles, and ends. And with every ending, there is always the seed of a new beginning. The cycle begins again. So, in the hard seasons, when life feels caught between sorrow and hope, Westcott's triad reminds us that something new is being born. That even when the way seems blocked, a third way will open in time. He describes the triad as sacred, as something that governs both heaven and earth. It is the number of completeness. For something to be whole, it needs its third part. And if we think of the things we long for, peace, love, meaning, they too are formed by this threefold nature. Peace comes not just from the absence of conflict, but from understanding and acceptance. Love grows not only in passion, but in trust and care. Meaning arises when we bring together our experience, our thoughts, and the story we tell about them. In every part of life, three is working quietly, shaping what we are and what we become. As we reflect on this, perhaps we can see how Westcott's vision of numbers is not distant or mathematical, but deeply human. Numbers are not only measures of the world, they are part of its very fabric. They are how the universe holds itself together, and how we, as part of that universe, find our way. 3 teaches us that we are not trapped between opposites, that for every tension there is a higher way. It reminds us that we are more than our thoughts and feelings, we are also the choices we make between them, and it shows us that life, though full of division, is always seeking harmony. So if you find yourself standing between 2 paths, unsure which way to turn, remember the triad. There is a way that holds both truths, that finds balance. If you are caught between past and future, lost in regret or fear, remember that the present moment, the third point, is where your life is lived. And if you feel incomplete, as though something is missing, let 3 remind you that wholeness is not far. It is found when we bring together all parts of ourselves, our mind, our heart, and our will, and walk forward with all of them, united. But have you ever paused to wonder why certain patterns seem to follow you throughout life? Why some moments feel incomplete, as though the story has yet to finish, like a circle not quite closed? In Westcott's view, 3.5, that simple fraction, stands at a threshold. It speaks of cycles interrupted, of journeys that pause before reaching their end, of balance nearly attained, but not quite. Think for a moment about the world around you. The moon, for instance, waxes and wanes in phases, but when does it holds its greatest mystery. Not in fullness and not in darkness, but somewhere in between, a moment of pause. Like 3.5, the number that reflects the very sense of almost, the place where potential lingers, waiting for completion. Westcott suggests that numbers like these are not chosen at random, by nature or history. Rather, they are markers, symbols left for us to decipher. 3.5 carries with it echoes from ancient times, when mystics and sages saw in its form a sacred pause in the rhythm of life itself. Consider how often 3.5 appears, quietly embedded in the world's oldest traditions. In the Book of Revelation, we find a time, times, and half a time, a cryptic duration that signifies something yet to be fulfilled, a prophecy half spoken. An event unfolding but not yet whole. The number is there, as though the universe itself is holding its breath, waiting for something to happen, but not yet moving forward. And in ancient mythology too, we see the echoes of 3.5. The story of cycles, of birth, life and death, often unfolds in threes. But when there is a half added, a question is left hanging in the air. What is left undone? What remains to be completed? Westcott invites us to see this number as more than an accident of arithmetic. He reminds us that life itself often feels like 3.5, caught between what was and what will be. Perhaps you felt that way in your quiet moments, standing between two chapters of your life, aware that something is missing, not yet in place. The job you're waiting for, the relationship that feels unfinished, the dream that remains just out of reach. And yet, in that in-between space there is deep meaning. Westcott suggests that 3.5 is a symbol of becoming, a moment when transformation is possible because things are not yet settled, a space where hope and growth reside. Now think of the seasons. We speak of spring, summer, autumn and winter, 4 stages, but life does not always move so neatly. Sometimes we are caught between spring and summer or autumn and winter, a half step, a transition, a moment of waiting. That is 3.5. The world holding its breath between stages, between the old and the new. Even within yourself, you may feel this pause, a sense of waiting for the next part of your story. And Westcott would tell you this is natural. It is a pattern as old as time, a rhythm that the universe itself seems to follow, for in all growth there comes a moment when we are nearly there but not quite. And in that space, we are shaped. In the ancient mysteries, 3.5 was seen as a broken circle. Imagine a wheel missing a spoke, still turning but unsteady. And isn't that how life feels sometimes? Like we are spinning through days that are incomplete, waiting for the missing piece to arrive. Westcott urges us to see this not as a flaw, but as a vital part of existence. Because in those moments when things feel incomplete, we are being prepared, readied for something greater. It is in the pause that we gather strength. It is in the waiting that we grow wise. Think also of time itself. In some ancient calendars, great cycles were divided into 7s. But what if that cycle breaks at 3.5? It speaks of disruption, of change. And change, though unsettling, is often the doorway to something new, a new chapter, a new life. Westcott reminds us that 3.5 is not merely a number, it is a story. The story of humanity, always reaching, always striving, never quite finished. We are all works in progress, living within that mysterious pause. And rather than fearing it, we might embrace it, trusting that what is incomplete today is the beginning of something greater tomorrow. He draws attention to its symbolism in the Book of Daniel, where a time, times, and half a time marks a period of waiting, of tribulation, but also of eventual fulfillment. A reminder that even in the hardest times, there is a promise, though unseen, though delayed. So perhaps when you feel lost, uncertain, waiting for answers that do not yet come, you are living in your own 3.5, a moment that prepares you for what is next. And if you listen closely, You may sense that quiet rhythm, beating in the background of all life, guiding you forward, gently but surely. Westcott believes that to understand numbers like 3.5 is to understand life itself, because life is rarely neat or complete. It is full of spaces in between, moments when we are called to be patient, to reflect, to grow. The number whispers to us that being in the middle of the journey is still part of the journey, that becoming is just as sacred as being. So when you think of your own life, of the questions unanswered, the dreams unfulfilled, know that you are standing in that ancient rhythm. You are part of the great dance of creation where nothing is rushed and everything unfolds in time. 3.5 teaches us to honor that process. And perhaps that is why Westcott's reflections still matter, because in this fast-paced world, we are often taught to seek completion, to rush toward the finish. But the wisdom of 3.5 reminds us that there is beauty in waiting, power in the pause, and that sometimes the space between things is where the magic happens. So, if today you find yourself caught between what was and what will be, if you are waiting for life to make sense, know that you are not alone. You are part of an ancient pattern, a story written in the language of numbers, echoing through time. As Westcott might say, let 3.5 be a gentle reminder that life is not always about arriving, but about becoming. About learning to hold space for the unknown, trusting that in time all things will find their place. But have you also paused to wonder why the number 4 appears so often in the fabric of the world around us? Why there are 4 seasons, 4 cardinal directions, 4 elements that the ancients believed to compose all matter: earth, air, fire, and water? These are not mere coincidences, they are quiet whispers of an ancient truth, a truth that numbers do more than count. They shape the very reality we live in. Through Westcott's eyes, we are invited to see how this simple number reveals a hidden architecture that holds the universe in balance, and perhaps shows us how to bring balance to our own lives. Imagine the 4 winds sweeping across the plains and mountains, the 4 directions, north, south, east, and west, guiding sailors upon the oceans and explorers across unknown lands. Even the 4 walls of a house offer us shelter, protection, a sense of home. This, Westcott suggests, is not merely practical, but mystical. 4 is the number of stability, of the material world shaped and ordered, giving us the foundation upon which life unfolds. In the ancient mystery schools, which Westcott so often draws from, the tetrad was known as the number of manifestation. It was the first number seen as fully formed, complete, embodying the solidity of Earth itself. 1 is unity, 2 is division, 3 is movement. But 4 is when the movement stops, when energy takes form, when potential becomes real. Think of a square. It is perhaps the most familiar shape in human life. It underpins the architecture of our cities, the fields that feed us, even the frames through which we see the world, windows and doors. And yet, beyond the visible, Westcott encourages us to recognize that 4 symbolizes the essence of materialization itself. It is the moment when what was formless gains structure, when thought becomes reality. What's fascinating is that Westcott traces this reverence for the Tetrad book to the most ancient cultures. To the Pythagoreans, 4 was sacred. They called it the root of all things. Why? Because when you add the numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4 together, you reach 10. The decad, which they believed to be the number of completion, of divine order, and so the tetrad was the key that unlocked the door to wholeness. But what does this mean for you, living in a world so distant from Pythagoras or Westcott's quiet study? It means that when your life feels unsteady, when things are shifting like sand beneath your feet, perhaps what you are missing is the presence of 4, the energy of grounding, structure, and manifestation. Westcott, with his careful attention to symbolism, points out how even in nature, 4 rules supreme. The year, in its great dance, is divided into 4 seasons: spring, summer, autumn, winter, each a vital part of the cycle. We see 4 phases of the moon, marking time and mystery in the night sky. And in ourselves, though perhaps we don't always notice, there are 4 limbs that give us movement, strength, and the ability to create. When Westcott turns to the human soul, he draws upon older traditions that say the soul itself is composed of 4 parts: the mind, the heart, the spirit, and the body. All must be in harmony for a person to be whole, and perhaps you've felt it in those moments when one part is in turmoil, how everything feels out of balance. The Tetrad reminds us that we are beings who need grounding in every part of ourselves, not just one. There's something beautifully simple about the number 4, yet profound. Westcott suggests that the number teaches us about limits, not as something to fear, but as something that makes life possible. Think of a river. Without its banks, its limits, it would be not a river, but a flood. The form makes the function. So too in life. When we learn to set boundaries, when we accept our limits, we can focus our energies and achieve what otherwise would be scattered and lost. Consider the 4 elements, the great classical division of all things: earth, air, fire, and water. Westcott reflects on these not only as substances but as forces shaping our inner world. Earth, the steady and firm; air, the light and free; fire, the passionate and transformative; water, the flowing and adaptable. When these are in balance within us, we feel whole. But when one dominates, perhaps when fire rages unchecked as anger, or when water floods as sorrow, we lose our way. And so the Tetrad becomes a symbol of balance, not a flat, lifeless balance, but a dynamic equilibrium, where each part plays its role. Westcott also explores how 4 represents justice and morality. The ancients saw in 4 the principles of fairness and balance, because only with balance can there be justice. A world that tilts too far to one side falls into chaos. This thought lingers, perhaps because we can see even now how the absence of balance in society leads to unrest and suffering. If we could return to the wisdom of the Tetrad, seeking fairness, structure, and stability, perhaps our communities would heal. The Pythagoreans, Westcott reminds us, went so far as to swear their most sacred oaths upon the tetractys, a triangular figure made up of 10 dots, formed by the sum of 1, 2, 3, and 4. In this symbol, they saw the universe itself, each layer a step toward perfection. And at its heart, 4, the point where the formless becomes form, the dream becomes reality. Isn't that what we seek? To bring the unseen into being, to take the visions in our minds and make them real in the world. Westcott, quietly and gently, suggests that when we learn the lesson of the Tetrad, we gain that power, not through force, but through understanding the patterns that shape existence. Imagine your own life as a square, 4 sides representing your values, your dreams, your relationships, and your actions. When one side is missing or weak, the square collapses. But when each is strong and defined, it stands firm, a foundation upon which you can build anything. Westcott's reflections invite us to think about how we order our lives. What are the 4 pillars upon which you build your days? Are they sturdy, well-shaped, or have you neglected one, leaving the whole shaky and uncertain? Perhaps the Tetrad calls you to return to these foundations, to bring stability where there is chaos, form where there is confusion. And yet, there's a gentle warning in Westcott's words. The Tetrad, though a number of strength and form, can become a prison if we cling too tightly to structure. Life must have form, yes, but also room for growth, for change. The 4 walls of a house protect, but they can also confine if we never open the door. So too, the Tetrad teaches not only to build and order, but to know when to let new winds blow through. As you listen to this, perhaps there are moments in your own life you can reflect upon. Times when you longed for stability, when you wished for solid ground beneath your feet. The Tetrad is there, in the quiet patterns of the world, reminding you that balance is possible, that structure is not the enemy of freedom, but the ground upon which freedom can walk. And so, as Westcott would have us see, 4 is not just a number on a page, it is a force moving through the world, shaping the seasons, the skies, the waters, and the earth. it shapes your life too, in ways seen and unseen. If today you feel scattered, perhaps the answer lies in remembering 4, finding the parts of yourself that need strengthening, the areas of life that need walls for protection, and others that need open windows for light. So let the tetrad be a guide. Let it show you how to build a life of balance and beauty, shaped by the quiet, enduring power of 4. But after this, we also have the number 5. And perhaps along the way, you might begin to see how numbers in their quiet way shape not only the world, but your very life. In the world of Pythagoras, 5 was never just a number. It was life in motion, a bridge between the worlds of matter and spirit. Imagine for a moment standing at the meeting point of 2 great rivers, one carrying the earthy currents of existence, the other flowing with the light of higher understanding. Where they meet, that is 5. Westcott called the pentad the emblem of health and safety. He describes it as a symbol that carries balance within imbalance, harmony within chaos. If you think about it, our very bodies are built upon this mysterious number. 5 fingers upon each hand, 5 toes upon each foot, 5 senses, sight, hearing, smell, taste and touch, through which we experience this vast, mysterious world. Westcott draws upon ancient wisdom to remind us that in Greece, the pentad was considered sacred to Mercury, the messenger, the traveller between worlds. And if Mercury was the guide of souls, the bringer of messages from realms beyond, then what does the pentad bring to us? Perhaps a message of movement, of progression, a reminder that life itself is always in motion, never stagnant. Think of how often you stand at a crossroad, torn between 2 decisions, 2 paths. The pentad appears then, a sign that even between opposites there is a way forward, a path that brings together the best of both worlds, a way to move, to grow. Westcott reflects on the ancient belief that 5 is the number of the microcosm, the small reflection of the great whole. You and I, tiny worlds, mirroring the vast cosmos. Isn't that a thought to hold close when life feels overwhelming? That within you lies the map of the universe, that when you breathe, when you choose, when you dream, you are echoing patterns as old as time itself. In the symbol of the pentagram, the 5-pointed star, Westcott finds a key to this mystery. A figure drawn with one line, endless and whole, a shape known to the Pythagoreans as a sign of health and strength, of protection and power, but also of inner unity. Each point representing an element: earth, water, air, fire and spirit. And when these elements are balanced, when they work together, life flourishes. Now close your eyes for a moment and imagine that star. See it glowing gently in your mind's eye, each point a part of yourself, your body, your thoughts, your emotions, your passions, your soul. The pentad reminds you, you are whole, even when you feel broken. You are complete, even when the world feels fragmented. Westcott also speaks of the magical nature of 5, how it binds together the power of opposites, the 2 and the 3, the feminine and the masculine. In the pentad, they meet, not to fight, but to create a new beginning, a new path. Perhaps in your own life, the things that feel like conflict, your fears and your hopes, your doubts and your dreams, are not enemies. Perhaps they are 2 halves, waiting to be brought together to form something new. And isn't that a comforting thought? That the struggle itself may be a sign of creation in progress, that within the tension, a new self is waiting to emerge. Westcott tells us too that 5 governs all that is full of change, motion and life. Look around you. Nothing truly stands still. The tides rise and fall, the wind shifts, the sun sets and rises, and within you too there is a current, a rhythm. You are never stuck. Even when days feel heavy, when nights feel endless, the pentad reminds you, life moves. You move. And think of this. 5 is at the heart of nature's patterns. The petals of flowers often unfold in 5s. The starfish moves with 5 arms. The human form itself is a pentad walking the earth, 2 arms, 2 legs and a head, forming a living star. Perhaps that is why, deep in ancient times, the pentad was drawn as a symbol of man reaching upward, arms and legs spread wide, head lifted to the sky, a figure of hope, of striving, of being part of something larger than oneself. Westcott brings out that in the secret schools of the old philosophers, 5 represented the triumph of spirit over matter, because it holds both within itself, the earthly and the divine. So maybe when you feel torn between your higher aspirations and the weight of daily life, the pentad has something to say to you, that you are meant to live in both worlds, to bring light into the ordinary, to find the sacred in the simple. In another curious way, Westcott shares that the pentad is linked to the idea of regeneration, of being reborn. Just as the starfish can regrow a lost limb, just as a broken heart learns to beat again, 5 holds that quiet power. Maybe that's why it's been seen as the emblem of health, of wholeness, because it holds within it the promise that no matter what is lost, something new can be created. Perhaps you, listening now, need to hear that life has not finished writing your story, that within you, the pentad is at work, restoring, healing, preparing you to begin again. Westcott, in his calm and thoughtful way, brings to light that 5 is also a number of mystery and magic, because it is always on the move, never quite caught. And isn't that like life itself? Just when we think we've understood it, life surprises us. But maybe that's part of its beauty, that it keeps us growing, learning, reaching. Westcott leaves us with the sense that 5 is the number of humanity, not perfect, but striving, not whole in every moment, but always reaching for wholeness. And if you carry that thought with you, perhaps you'll begin to see yourself with gentler eyes. So the next time you see 5, in the petals of a flower, in the fingers of a hand, in the points of a star, perhaps you'll remember what Westcott tried to remind us, that you are a part of the great pattern. You are made of the same mystery as the stars, the sea, and the wind, and that within you, always there is the power to heal, to move forward, to create something new. But now we focus on another number, the hexad, the number 6. 6, a simple figure, a point between 5 and 7, but to Westcott and to the wise mystics of ancient times, the hexad is more than just a number. It is harmony, balance, and the emblem of a world perfectly arranged. Think for a moment, when we speak of balance, we often think of scales evenly set, of forces held in perfect tension. But Westcott shows us that this balance is not merely physical. It is the harmony of spirit and matter, of above and below, of inner and outer worlds. The hexad stands as the silent architect behind this balance, shaping what we see and what we cannot. He draws us first to the natural world, where the number 6 appears without effort, without force, as though it has always belonged. The snowflake, delicate and fleeting, forms in perfect sixfold symmetry, each arm a mirror of the next. The honeycomb, made by bees, who have never read a book nor learned geometry, follows the hexagonal shape, for in that shape lies the greatest efficiency, the most space with the least material. And Westcott asks us to wonder, what wisdom is hidden in the fact that nature itself prefers 6? But beyond nature, 6 appears as a symbol of deeper spiritual truth. Westcott reminds us that in ancient philosophy, the hexad represented the union of opposites. It was seen as the number that binds together the masculine and feminine, the active and passive, the earthly and the divine. It is the marriage of duality into unity, where contradictions cease to war and begin to dance. In our lives, how often do we seek this harmony? Between our responsibilities and our dreams, between who we are and who we wish to be. The hexad reflects that yearning, the longing to bring together all the scattered pieces of ourselves into a whole. Westcott also leads us to the realm of the sacred, reminding us that 6 is the number of creation itself. The world, in many traditions, was made in 6 days, a pattern echoed in the rhythm of Genesis, where on each day something new comes to life. The hexad becomes the number of formed existence, of a world shaped and ordered out of chaos, and perhaps when we feel lost in our own chaos, when life feels like fragments scattered in the wind, we are secretly seeking the hexad, seeking to bring shape and meaning back to our days. But even more, 6 teaches us about the symmetry of life. Look around. Insects move on 6 legs, flowers often bloom with 6 petals, and crystals form with 6-fold symmetry. There is a profound lesson here. Life is sustained by balance, not imbalance, not extremes, but a deep, silent symmetry that holds everything together. And Westcott does not stop there. He brings us into the world of the mind and spirit, showing how 6, as the hexad, connects to the soul's journey. The ancients, he says, saw 6 as a symbol of justice, because only when things are balanced can there be fairness. Imagine a life where every choice weighs equally, where every action finds its proper response. That is the world of the hexad. And when we seek justice, in our lives and in the world around us, we are really seeking to bring things back into that sacred balance. Yet, for Westcott, the hexad is also a symbol of struggle. For balance is not always easy. It must be earned. Just as the bee must labour to build its perfect hexagonal home, so too must we labour to find our balance, between duty and desire, between giving and receiving, between speaking and listening. And so the hexad becomes a reminder, a quiet whisper in the background of life that balance is possible, but it asks for effort, for intention. Westcott also reflects on the mystical and religious meanings that the ancients gave to 6. To them it was not just a number, it was a power, a virtue, a force that could shape reality itself. To know the hexad was to know the secret of harmony, to understand how to align oneself with the rhythm of nature, the justice of the heavens, and the creation of the world. And perhaps that is what we seek, even if we do not name it. A life where things fall into place, where we are in tune with the world around us, no longer fighting against unseen currents. The hexad promises that such harmony is not a dream, but a natural order, one that we can touch if we learn to see it. Westcott also lingers on the sacred geometry of the hexagram, the 6-pointed star, formed by 2 interlaced triangles. One points upward to the sky, to spirit, to aspiration. One points downward, to earth, to matter, to groundedness. Together they form a whole, as above, so below, as within, so without. When we reflect on that symbol, we might see ourselves in it. We too are beings made of both earth and sky, of flesh and dream. We live in a world of practical needs and spiritual longings. And when these 2 parts of us unite, when we stop denying either side, we begin to live fully, to live the balanced life that the hexad teaches. And so, when Westcott writes of the hexad, he is not merely teaching about a number. He is offering a vision of life, a life where balance, justice, creation, and harmony weave together into a tapestry that holds us gently but firmly. A life where even in times of chaos, we might remember that the snowflake still forms in 6-fold beauty, that the honeycomb still rises in perfect pattern, that the star still shines with 6 points, uniting heaven and earth. If you are listening now and life feels unsteady, if the balance you seek seems far away, perhaps you might look again to the hexad, to the quiet order that lies beneath even the most turbulent days, to the balance that is waiting to be found in every choice, every breath, and maybe, just maybe, in seeing the hexad not just as a number but as a living symbol, you might begin to see your own life with new eyes, to notice where the harmony is and where it longs to return. Now there's another number which is one of the most mysterious and powerful numbers in human history, the number 7. Or as the ancients call it, the heptad. This is not merely a number we see on clocks or calendars. 7 is a symbol, a secret thread woven into the fabric of reality. Westcott begins by describing 7 as a number of mystery and perfection. To him, it is the first number that truly stands alone, indivisible, untouchable, except by itself, and one. Think of that for a moment. It cannot be easily broken or shared. It keeps its secrets. As Westcott tells us, 7 holds a special place because it unites the spiritual and the material. The ancients saw the world in layers, the heavens above, the earth below, and man caught in between. And 7 was the bridge. 7 days of creation, 7 visible celestial bodies to the naked eye, the sun, moon, and 5 planets, and 7 tones in the musical scale, each a reminder that life moves in cycles of 7. But Westcott goes further. He says 7 is not only a number of the natural world, but a key to its invisible architecture. He writes that ancient sages, from Chaldeans to Hebrews, believed that 7 was a holy number, the seal of divine order. When you see 7, you are looking at something whole, something complete, something touched by a higher hand. Consider for a moment the 7 days of the week. Why not 6? Why not 8? Long before modern calendars, this cycle was chosen, as though humanity knew deep down that 7 was in harmony with the rhythm of life. 7 brings closure and renewal. At the end of 7 days, we begin again. Westcott reminds us that the ancients placed the number 7 at the heart of their rituals and sacred writings. The Hebrew menorah, with its 7 lamps, symbolized divine light. The walls of Jericho fell after 7 days of encirclement. Even the apocalypse in Christian thought is filled with 7s, 7 seals, 7 trumpets, 7 angels. But what does this mean for us as we walk through modern life? Westcott urges us to think of 7 as a sign of inner life, of introspection and deeper understanding. Unlike the number 6, which he says represents outward labor and completion in the material sense, 7 speaks of what lies beyond. It is the moment when we stop doing and begin being. Have you ever felt a pull to step away from the noise, to reflect, to understand yourself more fully? That is the power of 7 working in your life. The invitation to enter into harmony with something larger. Westcott tells us that 7 was always seen as a sacred pause, a moment for soul and spirit to catch up with the world. Think of the 7th day, the day of rest, of reflection, not just a break from work, but a return to what is essential. And this is where numbers begin to shape our reality in ways we often forget, because 7 is not just a quantity, it is a quality, a way of being, a rhythm that touches every part of existence. Look at the sky. 7 classical planets watched over the ancient world, the moon's phases guiding the tides, and our moods move through a cycle of roughly 28 days, 4 7s. Westcott believed that if we learn to notice these patterns, we will see that numbers are not mere abstractions, but living principles. They guide the turning of the stars, the unfolding of time, even the quiet moments of our own lives. 7, he says, is a number of initiation and revelation. It is the seeker's number for those who are called to look beyond the surface. In many ancient traditions, 7 stages marked the soul's journey to wisdom, and perhaps this is why we often find ourselves facing deep questions when we are alone, in the quiet, because we are, in that moment, living the mystery of 7. But Westcott also reminds us that 7 is a test, a challenge to look deeper, to not be satisfied with easy answers. It is the number of the unseen, reminding us that not everything that shapes our world can be held in our hands. 7 is in the rainbow's arc, in the music of a scale, in the structure of the human body. 7 openings to the head, 7 cervical vertebrae, 7 layers of skin. It is in the body and the cosmos alike. And so, as Westcott reflects, to truly understand 7 is to understand that the universe itself has a secret music, a rhythm that we can learn to hear if we are quiet enough. Imagine for a moment that your life too moves in sevens. 7-year cycles of growth and change. Periods of learning, of struggle, of rest. Perhaps if you think back, you will see it. How every 7 years, something new began. This, Westcott would say, is not coincidence. It is part of the deep order of things. But here is where his reflections become especially moving. For Westcott believed that numbers, and 7 in particular, are bridges between the mind and the divine. To meditate on 7 is to begin to hear the voice of the universe itself, a voice that calls us to balance, to patience, to wisdom. And in a world that so often pushes us to rush, to grasp, to never stop, the number 7 asks us to pause, to find silence, and in that silence, to find ourselves. Westcott closes his reflections on 7 by reminding us that this number is a keeper of mysteries. And perhaps, he muses, that is why it recurs again and again in sacred texts and natural forms. Because we are meant to keep searching its meaning, and through that search grow closer to truth. So as you move through your days, I invite you to notice. Notice how often 7 appears. Notice when you feel the need to stop, to reflect. Notice how your life unfolds, not in straight lines but in gentle circles, returning to old lessons in new ways, as though dancing to a rhythm older than memory. And maybe, in learning the secret of 7, we will learn to live more gently, more wisely, in tune with the quiet music of the universe. Now we move on to one of the most mysterious of these numbers, the number 8. The Ogdoad, the number that, in the eyes of ancient mystics and philosophers, holds the secret of cosmic balance, eternity, and the invisible forces that quietly shape our lives. What if, without knowing, you've been living in the embrace of 8 all along? Long before our modern world began measuring life in minutes and seconds, before the mathematician and the scientist gave us mechanical laws, there were those who looked at numbers as sacred. Westcott guides us beyond simple arithmetic into a landscape of mystery, where 8 is no longer just a number, but a symbol of harmony, equilibrium, and the eternal cycle of life and death. Consider this for a moment. 8 is the first cube number. The first that comes from multiplying something by itself, and then again. 2 times 2 times 2, and so 8 emerges as a perfect expression of growth, of expansion, and yet also of return. In every curve of the figure 8, every endless loop of its form, we see something profound, the shape of infinity. The idea that all things return to where they began, birth and death, dawn and dusk, breathing in and breathing out. Westcott reminds us that the ancients saw 8 as a symbol of regeneration. Where 7 spoke of completion, the whole cycle of creation, 8 begins again, carrying us to a new octave, a higher vibration of existence, and in that sense, 8 is a number of hope, of rising again when we have fallen, of moving forward when the world grows dark. The Greeks, whom Westcott draws upon, believed that 8 was sacred to Dionysus, a god of rebirth and transformation. And is it not true that within each of us, something always longs to be reborn, to shed the weight of yesterday and step into something new? Yet 8 does not give this renewal freely, like the shape of its form, looping endlessly. It asks us to embrace the rhythm of life, to understand that growth comes through cycles. Just as the moon waxes and wanes, so too do we rise and fall, learn and unlearn, love and lose, only to love again. Westcott also brings to light the deeper connection between 8 and the balance of opposites, light and darkness, spirit and matter. The Ogdoad was seen by the ancients as a harmony of these dual forces, held in tension yet complete. In Egypt, 8 was sacred because it represented the balance of the 4 elements: earth, air, fire, water, duplicated and made whole. Imagine this: the entire material world reflected like a mirror into the spiritual. A double world, 2 sides of a single coin. And perhaps this is why life so often feels like a dance between what we can see and what we cannot. The tangible world of work and struggle, and the invisible world of thought, dream, and desire. 8 teaches us to hold these opposites together, to walk the narrow bridge between them. But Westcott doesn't stop at the spiritual. He shows us how 8 governs even the laws of nature. The spider spins its web with 8 legs, a marvel of geometry and patience. The octave in music spans 8 notes, a ladder of sound that lifts the soul. And the ancient Pythagoreans, whom Westcott admired, believed that 8 was a number of justice, because of its balance, its symmetry. Think about it. The figure of 8 folds upon itself, giving as much as it takes. And so, 8 reminds us of fairness, of giving back when we receive, of seeking harmony in a world that often pulls us toward chaos. Yet there is more. 8, Westcott says, is a number of the unseen world, the world beyond what we touch and see. The Ogdoad in ancient Gnostic texts was the sphere above the material world, a step beyond the physical where souls long to ascend. When we struggle, when we seek meaning in the noise of everyday life, 8 speaks to the part of us that yearns for something higher, something that lasts beyond fleeting moments. It calls to our deeper nature, the part that knows we are more than just bodies moving through time. In this way, 8 shapes our reality, not through force but through rhythm, through its quiet reminder that all things return, all things balance, and all things rise again. And perhaps that is why, when you turn the figure 8 on its side, it becomes the symbol for infinity, the endless flow of existence. In a world that often feels broken, where endings seem final, 8 whispers a different story, that nothing is ever truly lost, only transformed, that every ending is a beginning in disguise. Westcott speaks of 8 as a guardian of cosmic law, and if you look closely, you'll find 8 in unexpected places. The double helix of DNA, the cycles of the seasons, the balance of day and night, all reminding us that behind the seeming chaos of life, there is a quiet order, a rhythm that, if we listen, can guide us. Perhaps that is what numerology truly means, not simply a belief in magic numbers, but a recognition that the universe itself is a grand symphony of patterns. And when we understand these patterns, we begin to move in harmony with life, rather than against it. So what does this mean for you? If 8 is the number of rebirth, balance, and eternal return, then in your darkest moments, you are never truly at the end. There is always another loop to the cycle, another dawn beyond the night. If 8 holds within it the essence of justice and harmony, then when the world feels unfair, 8 reminds you that balance will come, that what is lost will be found, that wounds will heal. And if 8 symbolizes the unseen, the step beyond the material, then perhaps when life feels empty, when nothing makes sense, 8 calls you to remember that there is more to you and to this world than what can be measured. Through 8, he reminds us of something the ancients knew, that reality is shaped by rhythms deeper than we see, that behind every storm there is calm, that after every night there is morning. So next time you see the figure 8, in the twist of a vine, in the ripples on water, in the way life loops back upon itself, remember the Ogdoad. Remember that you are part of this pattern, part of this eternal dance. And as you move through your own cycles of struggle, of triumph, of quiet reflection, may the wisdom of 8 guide you gently onward, reminding you that even when the path winds and turns, you are always returning home. Now let's consider the number 9, the Ennead, 9, the last of the simple digits, final, complete, and yet curiously eternal. For Westcott, 9 is a threshold, both an end and a beginning, a closing of a cycle, and the mysterious promise of something more. Consider this: when you multiply any number by 9, and then add the digits of that product together, again and again, reducing it to a single figure, it always returns to 9. 2 times 9 is 18. 1 plus 8, 9. 3 times 9 is 27. 2 plus 7, 9. No matter how far you go, 9 has a way of returning to itself, like a river that always finds its way back to the sea. Westcott saw in this something more than mere arithmetic. For him, this was a clue left behind by the architects of nature. A sign that within this world, there is a pattern that cannot be broken. 9 is the number of finality, and yet within that finality lies a secret endurance. The Ennead completes the cycle of digits, yet it never disappears, never fades, always reasserting itself. In this, Westcott found a symbol for the eternal nature of truth, and perhaps even of the human spirit. Think about life for a moment. How often do we find ourselves in cycles, birth and death, endings that lead to new beginnings, joy that fades and then unexpectedly returns? In the number 9, Westcott saw an echo of these rhythms. Life may move forward, but it often circles back. 9, he said, is the limit of all numbers, the edge where numbers seem to pause before leaping forward into the next cycle, like standing at the edge of the known world, about to step into mystery. But what if I told you that the Ennead also represents the power of multiplicity, a gathering of all things before they break into new form? In ancient thought, 9 was not merely an ending, but a gathering place, the sum of all ideas and forms before they are reborn. Westcott reminds us that 9 contains within it all the other numbers, all the earlier forms, compressed into a final shape. Think of the 9 months that mark the growth of new life within the womb. Nature itself honors this number, holding life within her until the perfect time to emerge. And if life itself respects this number, might it be that our own lives are shaped by these unseen cycles too, cycles we forget until we are called to remember? For the ancients, numbers were not cold, lifeless measures. They were alive as the wind or the ocean or the pulse in your veins. And 9 was sacred to the Greeks, to the Egyptians, and even to those older civilizations whose names have been swallowed by time. Westcott writes of the 9 muses of Greece, the goddesses of inspiration and knowledge. 9 who brought music, poetry, and wisdom to the world. He speaks of the Egyptian Ennead, a company of 9 gods who formed the cosmic order, a reminder that behind the chaos of life there is a pattern of divine intelligence. 9 for Westcott is the completion of ideas, the fulfillment of a process. When something has fully become what it is meant to be, it bears the mark of 9. And yet, in all this completeness, there is a kind of humility in 9, a quiet acceptance that having reached the end, it must now prepare for what comes next. As if the Ennead whispers to us, "You have learned, you have grown, now, are you ready to let go and begin again?" When we look at our lives, at endings, at changes that feel like loss, what if we saw them instead as moments of 9, points where the pattern has come full circle, and we are being asked to step beyond it into something new? And perhaps this is how numbers shape our reality, not just in their silent governance of nature, but in the way they reflect the journeys of our hearts. The Ennead tells us that nothing is ever wasted. Every moment, every sorrow, every triumph, it all gathers into the fullness of 9, and from there, something new can be born. Westcott also reminds us that 9 is associated with wisdom, the wisdom that comes not from rushing through life, but from having seen all its faces. When we think of those who carry true wisdom, the elders, the thinkers, the quiet observers, they are those who have walked through the cycles of life and emerged with understanding. 9 then teaches us patience. It asks us to trust that the cycle will complete itself in its own time. It teaches us to see value in every part of the journey, not just the beginnings, but the endings too. What if you are in a time of 9 now? A moment that feels like an ending, a closing of doors. Can you trust that this is the natural shape of things? That this ending is rich with all you have gathered along the way? And what if, just beyond this, something new is quietly waiting to be born? Westcott believed that when we align ourselves with the wisdom of numbers, when we listen to what they tell us about the shape of life, we live more fully, more peacefully. Because then we are no longer fighting the natural flow, we are walking with it. 9 teaches us that even when we think we are at the end, we are carried by the same forces that move the stars, the seasons, the beating of our own hearts. And perhaps that's the message Westcott most wanted us to hear, that numbers like 9 are quiet companions, showing us the way. If only we will see. So if you find yourself standing at a threshold, unsure of what comes next, remember the Ennead. Remember that 9 is not just an ending, but the fullness that makes new beginnings possible. And so, we arrive at the edge of this journey, where thought fades into silence, and understanding deepens into something more than words. If you've walked with me through these explorations of ancient numbers, through the hidden meanings carried in the simplest symbols of 1 to 9, then you'll know that numbers are far more than we were taught to believe. They are not just tools for counting, they are threads in the fabric of reality, and now, as we arrive at the decad, the number 10, we are not merely ending, we are coming full circle. The decad is the final note in this ancient song, but it is also the first note of something new. For Westcott, as for the ancients who came before him, the decad represents totality, the complete expression of all that exists. It gathers up all that has gone before, every number, every meaning, every possibility, and holds them together as one. As Westcott tells us, 10 is not only an end, but a return to the beginning. But now, with knowledge, imagine a circle. You walk its curve around and around, but when you return to where you started, you are not the same. You carry the journey with you. So too is life. The decad speaks to us of this truth, that nothing is ever lost. All your struggles, your questions, your hopes and failures, they are part of a larger shape, a greater whole that you may not yet see. But it is there. Westcott saw 10 as the number that reconciles all opposites. The monad, the one, was pure unity. But life is never just unity. Life is relationship, contrast, movement. So we moved through the other numbers, through division and growth, through struggle and harmony, and when we reach 10, we bring all of that together. It is the number of completion. If you think of nature, the cycles of birth and death, day and night, growth and decay, all of them move toward some kind of fullness before they begin again. The moon waxes to fullness and wanes. The seasons turn from spring to winter and back again. Our lives, too, move through these cycles, but what gives them meaning is the return. The decad reminds us that we do not walk in straight lines, but in circles, spirals, really, always rising higher or deeper, returning to places we have been, but with new eyes. Perhaps you've felt this in your own life. Times when you return to something you thought you were finished with, a relationship, a dream, a wound, and you see it now with greater understanding. That is 10 at work. Westcott draws from the Pythagorean tetractys, the sacred triangle formed from 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 equals 10. For the Pythagoreans, this triangle was not merely a figure, it was a vision of how the universe holds itself together. A vision that everything from the smallest grain of sand to the turning of the stars has a place, a meaning, a role to play in the whole. 4 levels, 4 layers, stacked into a triangle, reaching upward, like the structure of reality itself, like the climb of human consciousness, from simple awareness to profound understanding. And when you sum those first 4 numbers, you reach 10, the fullness. Perhaps this is why 10 speaks so powerfully to us even today. 10 fingers to shape the world, 10 toes to walk upon it, 10 commandments for those of faith, to guide a life. 10 as the base of how we count, how we measure, because it reflects something deep, something we know without knowing. Westcott reminds us gently that the decad reflects the cosmos itself, a perfect unity formed from infinite variety. So when you feel scattered, when your life feels broken into too many pieces to make sense, think of 10, because 10 says you are whole, even when you feel divided. You are part of a larger design, even when you cannot see its outline. If you could see with the eyes of the Descartes, you would see the pattern, how every heartbreak shaped you, how every joy prepared you, how every mistake led you to this moment. And isn't that what we long to know, that there is a pattern, that all we have lived has meaning? The Descartes whispers, yes, and though it may take a lifetime to see it, still it is there, holding us gently in its circle. So if you find yourself in a place of ending, know that you are also in a place of beginning.